Greetings all and sundry. Chris Thompson speaking, and you have found the Brain Software Podcast, coming to you almost live from Toronto, Canada, the hypnotic world epicenter. Today, in episode 153, Mike Mandel and I discuss all about self-hypnosis. So stick around.
And so we come to the end of yet another era, as the harvesters of a bright tomorrow engage all manner of citrus-based excitement. We, the happy few of the usual group of renegades, endeavor to lighten the burden of concupiscence, and that only those in the know need to know about. And when I say only those in the know, I actually mean none of those in the know. And of course, by referring to all those you will never know, there can only be one answer, and that's, I don't know. But in the immortal words of Britain's poet laureate, Sir Lanyard Ballwater, we invoke through our own dark episodes of fulmination, all otherwise will be moribund at best and sanctimonious at worst.
Oh, shut up!
And not until the great question is asked and answered, young man. Whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know?
These are days of victory. So let's welcome to the front seat of Larry's car. The distant hypnotic cousin of Sir Lanyard Ballwater. The Manchester Mangler of mesmeric power. And the stevedore of selective thinking, Mike Mandel.
Christopher, we are back, man. It's another awesome podcast, and we are rocking in the rooter and ready to go.
Yes, we are. And this one's all about self-hypnosis. In fact, it's all about easy self-hypnosis. So we hope you enjoy it tremendously. Now, we're going to be talking all about self-hypnosis in the context of how to make it as easy as possible. We're going to guide you through the 5 steps that we think are the most important. And these are all in our new product, Easy Self-Hypnosis, which you'll find on the website over at mikemandelhypnosis.com/ESH. So go there if you want the actual, what's that?
As in easy self-hypnosis?
Yeah, as in easy self-hypnosis, right. So with that said, that's what the topic is for today. We're going to give you some really great value. If you want the full course, you'll be able to buy it at ESH, Mike Mandel Hypnosis /ESH. Also note, though, the way better opportunity is to get it as it is included in our personal growth membership. $27 a month, cancel anytime. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/PGM, which stands for Personal Growth Membership. This course is included. So with that said, Mike, let's dive in. Let's get to our think tank words of the day. Anything else that we have to talk about? And let's teach some stuff about self-hypnosis.
Yeah, and this is great, Chris. Chris, this is something, I called you Quiz.
I noticed that.
This is a podcast we wanted to do for quite a while because we are primarily a hypnosis and NLP personal development podcast. And I think it's important to be able to do self-hypnosis, and it is really easy to get great results with it. So let's jump in with the think tank words generated by Sava Bukacic's actual think tank, and they are creditor, brrr, plankton, brrr, and pallor.
Nice. Okay.
We have to map these across.
For those who might be new to the podcast, the purpose of the think tank words, I just said think dank. Like the purpose of the think tank, we are both having problems saying things today.
I'm in the zone.
Yeah.
I'm up for this. I can do this. I'm in the zone.
This podcast.
My resources are all
it's
online.
It's going to be fantastic.
I'm ready for this. It's
all
fantastic.
Right. Remind people what's the purpose of the think tank words, Mike.
Well, the think tank words are drawn from an actual machine, which generates, I think, 17,000 random words. And by taking 3 of them, we used to do just 1, but 3 is better. It was Edward de Bono, the great MD lateral thinking specialist, who said that a random word causes a provocative operation and can trigger our brains into something new. So since we know we're talking about self-hypnosis in this particular podcast, we use the 3 think tank words and see what sort of generation it sparks in our brains, tying in with the topic that we're discussing today.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so the challenge is to fit those words in with the topic. So creditor, plankton, and poller.
Power, yeah. Now, the thing is, with these words, we can use them as stepping stones. The key is to just jump and skip ahead to something new. So what do you come up with creditor?
Well, with creditor, I feel like if you're a creditor, you are owed something, right? So you deserve to make changes to your life that are powerful. That's what I jump to immediately. What about you?
That's kind of interesting. So a creditor is the one who is owed something, right? Mm-hmm. So we say you can use self-hypnosis to the credit of your own life, build the credit of your own resources and new empowerment techniques so that you will be the master of your own reality. Awesome. Does that make sense?
Yes, I like it.
What are you going to do with plankton?
With plankton, I'm thinking about on the surface. It's growing and it is on the surface of the water, right? So I'm thinking, what's below the surface? And everything to do with hypnosis is obviously, we talk about the unconscious level. So when you go into a self-hypnotic trance with the purpose of investigate, can't even talk, Mike.
I'm in the same position today.
Just said investigating as my corrected version. Okay. It's just
5G.
Yeah. So when you're entering trance to investigate some aspect of change, a lot of the times what I'll notice is I don't actually have a clue what's going to come up in the trance experience. And that's cool. That's because it's below the surface. It is in the unconscious. It is not something I can predict in advance. And that's what I get from plankton. You?
Well, that's a really good one. It goes where I was going to in a slightly different way. Plankton, of course, is a green plant, single-cell green plant, and meaning it has chlorophyll in it, which means it goes through photosynthesis, meaning it needs sunlight for photosynthesis.
Ooh, yeah.
And again, you're saying on the surface. Now, light is always a symbol. The sun is always a symbol of the conscious mind. So we see with this that the conscious mind only penetrates so far. And it's going with what you said. It's just to the surface.
Beautiful.
Beneath the surface, that's where we're going to have the real change. So we decide in the daylight what changes we're about to make. But we use the knowledge of what we want to change and let the unconscious down below the layer of plankton do the real change.
You know, that idea of daylight and obviously then nighttime being the opposite, darkness. It feeds well into the idea that people think about hypnosis as being a form of sleep, which of course it's not. It's related in some ways, but it's not sleep. But we can think about making the decisions in our waking state and making the changes in our sleeping / hypnotic state. Right.
That's a really good point, Chris. And just as a side note, still hypnotically speaking, I said in one of our small group mentoring sessions through Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy the other day, the scariest movie I ever saw was called The Haunting. It was black and white from the 60s, about 1963. The Haunting of Hill House was the original book by Shirley Jackson. The story was redone later as a movie, and it's redone as a series, but the original is far more terrifying. Why is that? Because they don't show anything. They don't bring anything into conscious awareness, nothing. Mm-hmm. Everything is implied and heard and happening down below the surface, and it triggers all these primordial shifts down in our unconscious minds. You know, the best special effects are the human imagination. And it's a great one to watch. Anybody wants to understand how your unconscious will resonate with weird symbols and things, see The Haunting, the original from 1963. So below the plankton, we have pallor.
Pallor is a word I've never heard in my life, Mike, so I'm going to let you drive this one.
Well, the first time I saw the word was, I can tell you it was in 1967. I was reading the book Dracula by Bram Stoker, the original vampire novel. And it talked about how he looked in the casket. It said it was an impression of incredible pallor, his face. He was so pale with the gouts of blood on his lips from the most recent victim, but he's dead, right? He's the undead. Pallor, it comes from the same word. We have pallbearer. We have palliative care, caring for the dying. So pallor is that pale, dead look. And to that, I would say, no matter how dead a resource may seem on the surface, unconsciously, according to classic NLP. If we had a resource once, it
You
is
still
still
got
there,
it.
even if we had it for only 1 second.
Okay.
So let that be an encouragement, even if you think that your life is dead in the water. We believe you can still make immense changes, and self-hypnosis is the way to go with that.
Awesome. Yeah, I just right clicked and did the look up pallor, and it says the death-like pallor of his face as an example. So paleness.
Wonderful to be vindicated again.
That is
Hurrah!
What a horrible word. There you go. So let's apply that as we go forward.
What a horrible word. That's
hurrah!
Great. All about self, that was good. I've never heard you do a hurrah, and I'm glad you did. It's so much funnier than hooray. And then eventually you move to the medieval with Zs instead, Zs. Huzzah!
Huzzah.
I mean, that's even older. Okay, so all about self-hypnosis. Chris, what is the point of self-hypnosis? I mean, why would anybody want to even do it?
Well, and it might be a good idea to also talk about how is it different from meditation? Because a lot of people have heard of meditation. Not as many people are familiar, in my opinion, with self-hypnosis. And there is quite a degree of similarity between the two. We always say, not all fish are trout, but all trout are fish, right?
Right.
And so meditation is a form of self-hypnosis. It's under this larger umbrella. Meditation is a trance that you go in on your own, and there are all kinds of ways to do it, but we put them all under this umbrella of a form of self-hypnosis.
Yes.
And there's lots of things that you can do in self-hypnosis.
I've had people argue with me about this and say, no, it isn't. Meditation is different because of that. Here's my point. When you meditate, you'll produce an alpha wave, a low alpha. Some people will produce a theta wave. When you go into hypnosis, you produce a low alpha or a theta wave. Your brain waves are essentially the same. Whether you're chanting a mantra, a single syllable mantra on your exhalation to meditate, or whether you're, thinking of a Zen koan, like the sound of one hand clapping, or whatever it is, or you're listening to drumming, or drumming yourself. All of these are trance inducers. So we are hypnotists. We're not meditators. We're hypnotists. So we're seeing all of these under the broad category of hypnosis. And if anyone wants to disagree, that's fine. Just don't write to me. This is our opinion.
So the reason I brought it up, though, is obviously a lot of people will have heard of things like meditation. So what is that useful for? Well, a lot of people think it's really useful for being mindful or being calm or reducing anxiety or getting into a flow state or whatever it is. Right. And so, of course, we can do all of that with self-hypnosis, but we can also attack problems and unlock resources and motivate ourselves for action, change our beliefs, change our habits. What else do you want to go to? We can do all kinds of things, right? We can focus on making health changes.
Yeah. We can open our reality tunnels to see things differently. We talked in a very early podcast, maybe 140 podcasts ago, about the quarter game, where we're tuning our brain so that we start to look for quarters unconsciously and find them, 25-cent piece, Canadian or American.
But Mike, are you saying that self-hypnosis is magic and will make money land in your pocket?
Yes, Chris, that's exactly what I'm saying. I've got $10,000 I found this morning, all in quarters. That's the bad part. It's like 40,000 quarters. But and all of these things can be affected through self-hypnosis, because there is that argument that all hypnosis is to some degree self-hypnosis anyway.
Right.
Now, I can argue this very cogently. So some people say, no, it isn't, because in heterohypnosis, the other person has done this and this and this. And my response is always, and who is in the hypnotic trance? The subject. So who has responded to what the other person has done? The subject. So was the person free to not respond? Yes. So who's created the trance? The subject.
Exactly.
The subject can do the whole thing without the hypnotist, without the external source of hypnotic suggestion. So our view is all hypnosis is self-hypnosis to a degree, because you are the one who maintains the trance.
Absolutely. And the more you practice it, the better you will get. I was thinking about this today in advance of this podcast, Mike. Who should do self-hypnosis versus going to a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist? So,
great question.
Let's talk about that.
Well, I think anybody should be giving self-hypnosis a shot, because if you can do the work yourself, you may not need to go to a therapist, especially if you're doing generative change, making good things even better. Paul McKenna, the noted stage hypnotist, he would put himself in a trance before he went on stage.
Nice.
To make sure he did a really good show, which is an elegant use of this. You're using hypnosis to do better hypnosis. Yep. And again, we always give the medical caveat. Obviously, if you have any health disorder, any illness, mental illness, psychological problems, whatever, always check with your doctor first. Our thing is ecology first for the hypnotist and the subject. So always check with your doctor, but I cannot conceive of a doctor. And as you know, Chris, our friends have our group of friends number psychiatrists as their members as well. Yeah, we're both finding English as our second language or third language today. But we have friends who are psychiatrists, and they would have no problem with any of their patients doing self-hypnosis. It's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Think of it this way. Hypnosis is a tool. Self-hypnosis is an example of how to use that tool on yourself. And it should not ever take the place of other logical things. So obviously medical stuff, obviously physical stuff. So you wouldn't want to do self-hypnosis to get in shape, but then do it at the exclusion of actual exercise. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
You wouldn't think to yourself, well, I've got this magic power called self-hypnosis, so I don't need to exercise or I don't need to lift weights to get stronger. I'll just imagine it happening. Probably a good idea to do both.
And here we have the word complementary with an E, not an I. Not giving someone a compliment, but complementary means going alongside of as an adjunct. So we see hypnosis, either heterohypnosis, hypnotizing others, or self-hypnosis, hypnotizing oneself, as an adjunct to other forms of medical care. They don't replace it.
The nice thing too is when you build your schema, as we always tell people to do on this podcast, when you add the requisite knowledge and you learn new things, then you'll have more resources with which self-hypnosis can help you apply that knowledge.
That's great. And it's a resource. And, we interviewed our friend Gary Coles from England many podcasts ago. And here's a guy who uses hypnosis alongside the medical profession to help people who are dealing with cancer.
Right. He's
with a family member or with the person themselves, with the oncologist. Yeah. So there's all of the things pretty well that you can use hypnosis for, you can use self-hypnosis for. So we break it down into two broad categories: remedial change and generative change. Well, it's always going to be change of some sort, because the whole point is, if things aren't changing, what's the point in even doing it? Well, even if it's just to relax you, that's a change, So we say remedial change is fixing something. Generative change is creating a new resource or improving something you already do well.
Right.
So helping a runner run a marathon faster would be generative change. Helping someone overcome fear and anxiety would be remedial change. But if that runner has anxiety that he's not going to run fast enough, we're doing both, right?
Exactly. Like you could have a runner who's always concerned that he's going to run out of steam at the very end of the race. Well, that's now an anxiety that you need to deal with. And hypnosis can help. And that would be considered almost like a remedial aspect to the generative change work. So
beautifully put. Well, wonderfully put there, Christopher. I'm going to my wizard voice too. So
all right. So shall we go through the process?
Well, yeah. Step one, what you've got to do is find out what your outcome is. This is an NLP word.
What do you want?
Yeah, what do you want, or what would you like to have happen, the clean language version? In fact, I think it's about time I got Judy Reese's clean language book out and go through it again. I've gone through it 3 times and I got it pretty nailed, but it's about time to do it again. What would you like to have happen? Your outcome. What will you see, hear, and feel when you have this change? The reason we say that is then it becomes sensory-based and can be measured. Remember Tony Robbins used to do that wonderful line. He'd say to someone, "What do you want?" And they'd say, "I want more money." And he'd hand them a quarter and say, "There, you got your outcome." They haven't been clear on what the outcome is. So your outcome has to always be stated in the positive. You want to explain why?
Yeah, I think that when you state your outcome in the positive, then you're aiming your brain towards what you do actually want. And if you say to yourself, like I'll give you an example, Mike. Of course, people listening to this podcast probably know I'm deeply fascinated with gymnastic strength training and handstands and things like that. I'm working really hard on handstands right now. Well, if I said, I don't want to fall over all the time, I don't want to lose my balance. Well, all I'm doing is aiming my brain towards the idea of losing my balance. Whereas if I said my outcome is to stick that handstand perfectly steady and hold it for 30 seconds. Okay, that's a clearly defined outcome. And I'm aiming my brain towards that rather than that which I don't want. I don't want to fall over.
Totally, totally. You know, how many times I told you, Chris, when I was a therapist in the 1990s, I had so many people come in and I would ask them what they wanted. And about 80% of it was Pareto's principle, because a lot of them wanted remedial change. Very few wanted generative change back then. But they would routinely tell me what they didn't want. You know, I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to be arguing all the time, whatever it is. So the point is, what you don't want is an infinite list. We always joke about this and say you don't want to be a tin miner on Jupiter. You don't want to do root canals on yourself. You don't want to set a bonfire in your bedroom. It's an infinite list. So by focusing on what you do want, you begin to organize your internal processes so your brain starts to move towards a positive outcome. So it must be positive, but it also must be achievable, right?
Absolutely. So you have to have a goal that is achievable. So if you said, I want to, let's say you weigh 200 pounds and you know your ideal weight is 160. So you want to lose 40 pounds. You want to drop 40 pounds of excess body fat or weight, whatever. You don't want to say, well, I want to be 160 pounds next week.
Yeah, it's a bit unreasonable.
That's not reasonable. Or if you're saving for your kids' university education, as I'm doing now, because my kids keep getting older every day. Funny how that happens. I don't want to say, well, I need an extra $500,000 by next month. That's unlikely to happen, right? If I figure it's going to cost that much to send.
Yeah, unless you open a meth lab or something like that. So I don't think it's going to happen.
Heisenberg. Yeah. So, all right. That was weird.
Apropos of nothing. We'll edit that out. We haven't said we'll edit that out for a long time, so we'll edit that out too.
Yeah. Oh, do you remember when we I can't remember who it was, but somebody used to email us. One of our
guy.
I think it was David who drove in from San Francisco. It might have been him. And you guys, you always say, I'll edit that out. It's getting really annoying. And you wrote back and you said, well, we'll edit that out. All right. So,
now listen,
what track here?
It's also, your outcome has to be up to you, not up to someone else.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way of reminding people that they have to decide their own life.
Right. And we've already said reasonable and sensory based.
Yeah, reasonable. You're not going to define, oh, my outcome is to lose X amount of weight. That's an absurd amount of weight to lose in a week, or to gain a certain amount of wealth next month. Not going to happen.
So your time must be achievable.
Yeah. Make plans that are achievable and seem reasonable. And if you're not sure what's reasonable, don't limit yourself that, it's going to have to take you 20 years to achieve that either.
Right.
But just give yourself some reasonable time frames and some reasonable goals. Talk to people. If you're not sure what's reasonable, find out.
Yeah.
That's where the complementary part comes in.
Nice, very nice.
Have the power of hypnosis doesn't stop you from being able to go out and talk to other people and just use the normal skill called conversation,
right,
and learning to also supplement what you need to know.
Yes, that's good. And how long you want to be in trance? I mean, you've got to decide in advance. How long are you going to do this?
Yeah.
I don't mean for the rest of your life. I mean, in that session, we think 20 minutes to 30 minutes is long enough for just about anything. Say you wanted to relieve some pain and inflammation in a sprained wrist or something. 20 to 30 minutes would be great. So you plan in advance how long you're going to go into trance. And you want to plan, how will you feel when you awaken? Now, we know you're not asleep. We just say awaken because it's in the zeitgeist. Everybody sees it as, awakening. Oh, we emerge, people. Yeah, we don't care at all. So continue to say it. But how are you going to feel when you awaken? Are you going to be A, alert, refreshed, and ready for anything, or tired, relaxed, and ready for bed? I mean, those are the only two.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were going into trance to reduce some sort of discomfort, pain, etc., you're still going to want to come out feeling alert and ready for anything, or ready for bed, whichever one it is. Yep. Despite the fact that the outcome is a separate issue. The outcome is to deal with the discomfort or the pain or whatever it is, and you want to feel awake and alert, or sleepy, whatever it is.
If you have a 5-hour drive to Montreal that evening, or you want to come out of your hypnosis alert and refreshed. You don't want to be all groggy driving.
Exactly.
There, So
you're defining your outcome, and you're picking your three things. So your outcome, what is it that you want? How long are you going into trance for, and how are you going to feel when you come out?
Beautiful. Well summed up. Non-Ken Sweatman. Now, we believe in setting up a nice hypnotic environment. You got to find something that works for you. So where are you going to do this? Obviously, the middle of a kindergarten class is not your best bet at first, although I could certainly do it now, and I know you could too. We've got enough self-hypnotic skills, and we can do it pretty well anywhere. Where are you going to be? Pick a nice spot that is brain nourishing, as Michael Gelb says. Do you want to be sitting or do you want to be lying down? Well, just realize if you're lying down, there is a chance you can fall asleep. But if you're doing this for a power nap anyway, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, exactly. When I use hypnosis to segue to power napping, I always do it lying down. And the most important thing for me is to make sure that I've got some sort of pillow or whatever appropriately positioned under my neck so that I'm not uncomfortable. I want to be comfortable, and then boom, no problem. But if I'm doing hypnosis for some sort of generative change thing and I want to come back feeling alert and refreshed, I will always do it sitting in a chair, because then I will not fall asleep.
Yeah, good thinking. So you get the knack of this. Remember, you're going to get better at this over time. It's a thing that will improve with practice. So do you want the room dark or bright? Again, if you're power napping, you're better in a dark room. If you're doing some just tooling around in your unconscious, it probably doesn't matter that much. But as long as it's not bright light through your eyelids, that's going to be distracting you. But what about disturbances? Like telephones. How do you handle that?
Yeah, always be consider the English problem again here, Mike. Always be thinking about who's going to bother you, what sounds might disturb you, etc. And it's a good idea to put your phone in another room or put it on do not disturb, or just be somewhere where you just won't be disturbed for the amount of time that you plan on being in trance. It's just easier that way.
Right. Now, obviously, anything like an emergency, you wouldn't really have to worry about that, because your unconscious mind, one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is to protect your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it doesn't protect your physical body, it has nowhere to live. So if there is an emergency, something that requires your attention, your unconscious mind will awaken you and bring you out of hypnosis and be ready for it just right away.
Right. And one way to think about this, we talked about this, I think, last week, Mike, is if something would normally wake you up from sleep, then self-hypnosis is not sleep. You're not asleep unless you fall asleep doing it, in which case it's sleep.
Right.
Panic about, is it okay to take a nap? What if there's an emergency? It's the same thing here. Your worst case scenario is you will fall asleep if you're lying down. And then it's just like any other nap that people take all the time. So there's no reasonable worry here about emergencies happening. You will come out of trance.
That's good. Notice that emergency has the word emerge in it.
Emerge. Yes, it does. That's right.
Now, what about background sounds? One of the things you can do is you can have nature sounds in the background. I love some of the Dan Gibson recordings. I nearly said CDs, but of course they're all in Apple Music. Dan Gibson was a Canadian wildlife guy who recorded the sounds of nature. Streams and rain and birds and all this stuff. I find that kind of stuff with a self-hypnosis session to be extremely relaxing, and it helps me go into trance very quickly.
Yeah,
but it's a personal thing.
I like the idea of having some sounds that are reasonably predictable, because then you just get used to them and they actually anchor in your mind to the idea of what you're doing hypnosis. I'll give you an example. Whenever I'm going into hypnosis for a power nap, I always put on, these days, the same album. It's a Dire Straits album called On Every Street.
Yeah.
I love that album. It's so mellow. And if I put that album on, it doesn't matter if my kids are in the room or I'm hearing them playing in the backyard. I can be lying on the couch and I'll easily slip into trance and I will fall asleep and I'll have a wonderful power nap and usually come back after about 20 minutes and feel fantastic.
Excellent. I'm just writing it down. Dire Straits On Every Street. That's one I'm not familiar with.
It's a terrific album. I think it's one of the very first albums that I ever bought on compact disc way back in the day.
Is Bono on it at all? Is he?
Mike does not like you too.
Is Bono on this album?
No, he is not.
Okay, so that'll be one of its strengths. So let's continue.
You were just waiting to drop that.
I was just to say that line that's still hilarious to me. Brilliant. Now, always the same place. What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage?
Yeah, so I don't think that you have to set a rule such as always at the same place, same time of day, etc. But let's suggest this: if you're starting out, what's the disadvantage behind picking a spot? Just one. There's none. Start with something. What strikes your unconscious as the most obvious place to begin? Ask yourself that and see what your brain comes up with. It's going to probably suggest a certain chair or a certain couch or whatever. You'll probably have this image that'll form in your mind of exactly where you'll be and how you'll be positioned. that's the best place to perhaps start.
Good thinking. Now realize though, if you always do it at the same spot, it'll tend to get anchored there.
Yeah. So
and things get anchored all the time. So
expand your repertoire as you go on and get good at hypnotizing yourself pretty much anywhere that it is appropriate.
Good point. Now, I said about just backing up to the sounds for a second. When I had my practice in Toronto, I dealt with fear of flying quite a bit. I had a disc, looked like a flying saucer. It was
I didn't
a sound
know you
generator.
flew to your office.
Shut up. It was a sound generator, and it had it made the sound of rain and so on. But one of the sounds was just a pure white noise rushing sound.
Oh, right. Okay.
Masking background sound. Guess what it sounded like? It sounded like the sound when you're in a jet plane.
Oh, right.
And so when I worked with fear of flying, I'd work with that plane, and that would become anchored. So when they're in the plane, it's automatically firing that relaxed, comfortable state again.
Oh,
so
that's
just
nice.
Remember, things are getting anchored. Now, we want to say time of day. The only point I would make there is don't do self-hypnosis just before you go to bed, because it is like a power nap.
Yeah, not
unless you're using it to go right into sleep from
exactly. If you're using it as an insomnia solution or something like that, it's fantastic. I know that on occasion when I wake up at maybe usually sometime between 1:30 and 3:30 in the morning, if I was to wake up and feel like it wasn't going to be super easy to fall back asleep because my brain is active or whatever, I'll use self-hypnosis, and that will typically do the job.
Excellent. So I want to teach an induction now.
Okay.
So we're going to give them a quality induction. This is a great one. It's called the pixel induction. And we teach this to our students all the time. It's a really cool one to do for your first try. So you're first trying it out. I mean, not trying to see if it'll work. So you've done all your stuff. You're determined your outcome. We're going to say everything we've set up to this point, you've already done. Your location and so on. The pixel induction is this.
Make sure you're safe if you're going to actually do this while listening.
No, don't do it now. I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm not going to walk you through it.
Okay.
So I already thought of that. So don't do this now. Wakes up, no responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. Do it when you can, when it's safe.
But you're going to embedded commands. We don't want you to do this now.
Yeah, pay no attention to the meme behind the curtain. So we have, say your right hand's your dominant hand. So just close your eyes, and all you're going to do is notice the millions of pixels inside your eyelids, the tiny pixels of light, just like on, like on your iPhone 11 Pro Max, where you have the retina display. The pixels are so small you can't see them with the human eye. But you'll see tiny pinpoints of light inside your eyelids. One writer actually said you're looking at the surface of your brain, in effect. And just notice those pixels and keep noticing them. And as you do that, then you're going to also put your attention on your index finger of your dominant hand. So I'll say my right hand. I just keep looking at the pixels and notice my first finger on my right hand. And what will happen is, it's happening now because I've done it so much, it'll very quickly start to feel different from the other fingers. It's starting to become cataleptic and maybe a bit rigid and numb.
I'm doing it right now, and I'm getting the same thing.
You're getting it. Now,
I'm getting that same cataleptic feeling.
Then you just acknowledge it to your unconscious.
So just at this point, Mike, let me just pause to make sure I understand correctly for everyone here. So you're looking at these pixels behind your eyelid, and simultaneously you're focusing on the feeling in that index finger. So you're actually keeping both of them in mind at the same time.
Yeah, and just keep bringing your attention back to seeing these pixels and feeling. So you're doing a seeing and a feeling at the same time.
You got one thing to focus on visually, one thing to focus on kinesthetically.
Right.
Okay.
And then once you notice it feels different, you just acknowledge it. You can internally say thank you or yes, and then instantly move your attention to the second finger and keep looking at the pixels. Wait till you notice the second finger is feeling different. Acknowledge it. Then go to your ring finger. Acknowledge it. Go to your baby finger. Acknowledge it. Go to your thumb. Acknowledge it. And by then you'll be in a nice trance.
Okay, so you're just cycling through, while you're focusing on these pixels behind your eyelids, you're cycling through the kinesthetic feeling of each finger. And as soon as that finger gives you this message that it feels different, you simply acknowledge it, usually internally, not out loud.
Yes.
Although you can. There's nothing wrong with it.
But there's no need to.
Okay, cool.
Now you can, at this point, once you reach your thumb, your whole hand will be feeling cataleptic and weird by this point because it continues. Got mine going quite a bit at this moment from talking about it. But you can stop now and just enjoy the trance or give yourself suggestions, or you can keep cycling through it until you just lose the picture and fade out completely. Either one, this is very flexible.
People who meditate, or, we were talking in the beginning that there are certain styles of meditation, like imagining a drum beat or something like that, or imagining that you're watching a metronome or whatever it is. You can see and feel the similarity here now, right? Where
Yes.
this is but we call this the induction. And there are, of course, things we can do once we are in that hypnotic trance. And that is the change work, which we're going to get to in a moment. But now you can understand, those of you listening, why we consider this to have such an overlap with meditation in a lot of ways for a lot of people.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And the reason we call it an induction is because it is one.
Yeah, it's like the doorway. It's like opening the door towards whatever's next. And Mike and you and I were talking about this as a metaphor for teaching hypnosis. If you're going to go to a coffee shop, well, you have to be able to show up and open the door so that you can go inside and have a conversation with the person you're going to meet there. And if that person you're meeting is you, because it's hypnosis,
nice.
You've got to open the door in your own mind. That's the induction. There's your
exactly. Now we're going to teach a change work example and then give you a bonus. But first, we have to have a word from our sponsors. Tonight on the 5,000-Year-Old Wizard Network.
David was a perfect child. Growing up in Bethel, New York, he did very well in school, especially science and mathematics, and could solve differential equations at age 3 while singing Grateful Dead songs and designing his own line of cannabis-concealing incense. By age 7, he'd built a paper airplane that could reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour and knew every song in the Jimi Hendrix catalog. He went on to graduate from MIT at age 17 with a doctorate in physics and was hired by NASA, not for his scientific knowledge, but for his fascination with Gus Grissom and the notorious explosive bolts incident. But on his second day on the job, Dave was accidentally propelled into the 42nd dimension when the 4 bread slice toaster element he was replacing arced and destroyed his left testicle, leaving him with monorchidism. What made it even worse was his attempt to beam a testicular reenfranchisement specialist up to the 42nd dimension, which failed dismally. The tractor beam in the toaster's debris field sent the wrong person. Instead of the doctor, the dimensional traveler was an unusual boy named Spunkaluccio, who attempted to reconsolidate Dr. Ambrose's testicle using a tuning fork, a wire brush, and a catnip-filled mouse. The result was predictable. But before Dave Ambrose fully succumbed to the miasma of pain, he managed to hit a dimensional reset button by chanting the last 2 lines of the Dread Susama ritual, summoning a beautiful cherry tree, which immediately blossomed into pink flowers.
Boring. Yes, Scro, we know. Everything changes when the lawn tree blooms, man. Just don't sing the effing song again, Pouch. I'm feeling okay now. Just let it go.
The Lawn Tree Blooms at 7:65 p.m. tonight on the Bag of Picthos Network.
So let's get an intervention now. So we know how to do an induction with the pixel induction, a way to get into trance, but a way of doing change work. Let's talk about something positive.
All right, cool. Let's do it.
So let's say you want to just breathe in a powerful resource, which is entirely possible with your unconscious. Pick something, pick a name for what you want. So it could be calmness. It could be intelligence.
Could be confidence.
Confidence, endurance, whatever. Pick that word. And of course, it'll be a nominalization. And determine what color comes to your mind when you say that word. And don't overthink
the idea
it.
that it's a nominalization. So it could be anything from empowerment to appreciation to self-respect to
Wisdom,
energy, whatever you want. What is it that you're looking for, defining that outcome in advance, picking the word that represents it to you, and then let's go on.
So then make sure that the color you come up with, it just, whatever it is, you don't have to think about it too much.
Gut feel.
Just go with the gut. So if you say wisdom and you get this dark purple, that's the color you're going to use. So while you're in your trance, you've got this word, you've got this color. Just imagine this color is abundantly in front of you. And you breathe it in slowly and deeply. And every time you breathe in, it fills your being. As you exhale, it pumps it through your entire mind and body. And then just continue doing so. And imagine you are resonating and glowing with this vibrant color. When that's the case, all you do is come out of trance.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So to recap, you've done the pixel induction method by focusing on the fingers and the visualization of the pixels behind the eyelids. And then when you feel that you're in a sufficient trance, you're now breathing in a color. You're imagining you're breathing in a color and you're visualizing that it's becoming more intense and spreading throughout your body. And you're doing that until you feel the job is done, right, Mike?
Yes, and just go with your gut again.
Right.
You'll know when you imagine yourself glowing with that color, whether you reach that point or just feel it's time. And then all you do is come out of trance. Just gently open your eyes, maybe stretch a bit, which will reorient you to the room, and just look around and come back.
So you've just described a very simple process here. So let's just quickly recap. So you're going to define what it is that you want, how long you're going to go into hypnosis for, how you're going to feel when you come out. You're going to set up your environment so that you know where you're sitting or lying, what you're going to deal with in terms of disturbances. Do the pixel induction that Mike just described, then do the breathing in that empowering color and come out. Now, how long do you think that whole thing will take?
Well, it could be just a few minutes or 20 minutes. It's entirely up to you.
Exactly. I would say minimum, you're probably looking at maybe 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. For the first time, easy.
Maybe 10.
When you're doing this a 10 millionth time, you can probably skip the induction entirely and just through anchoring and history and experience, just go right into trance and do the breathing exercise for a minute or two and then come right back out. But for the first time, give yourself 4, 5, 6 minutes, something like that, maybe even longer if you have it.
Okay, that's good. Now, we also have one little bonus thing. And we're talking about, this comes from the writing of Stanley Fisher, a psychologist who's no longer with us, but he wrote some good stuff on self-hypnosis. And he talks about the power of doing self-hypnosis for like 90 seconds to 2 minutes every hour through the day.
Yeah, his book is called Discovering the Power of Self-Hypnosis. And you and I both read that book. And the biggest nugget of wisdom that I took away was exactly that. You can go into trance for a minute or two. Let's say 90 seconds is maybe the shortest, but let's call it 2 minutes even, doesn't matter. And he teaches the idea that let's say you're working on a particular behavior change or motivation to exercise or decisions to make the right food choices, something like that. Go into trance literally for 2 minutes every hour that you're awake during the day. Just every hour, just for 2 minutes. Boom. And it's a great training exercise to aim your brain at what you're looking for.
Yeah, remarkably powerful. Excellent, man.
Awesome. So that's the bonus tip.
Yeah, get in there and just do it every hour or so through the day. Obviously not while you're sitting at a traffic light or something. I see so many people tranced out at traffic lights anyway, looking down, staring at their phone, waiting for the car behind them that will bring them out of it, you know?
Right.
So it's, okay, so on all of this foundation, anybody can now learn how to do self-hypnosis quite easily at a very basic level, but it's still effective. How about giving us the empowering question?
All right. So, empowering question 4, podcast 153, all about easy self-hypnosis. Ask yourself, now that I know how to change my feelings about something that bothers me, what will I work on first as I begin to make the power of self-hypnosis a regular part of my life?
Ooh, good one, buddy. Good one. And I'll give you the Meta 5, which is grade 6, and the Lucky Bar of Soap. This one you don't know. It's a good one. Well, I think they're all good ones. When I was growing up, cartoons were a huge part of my life. And a lot of them were the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, like Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear. There are all these other Secret Squirrel and Top Cat. And it would just, it was a thing we did. Felix the Cat, you watched cartoons a lot when you were a kid. And we had moved to Scarborough in the east end of Toronto from City of Toronto itself. And I was 10 years old. Started at Wexford Public School, brand new school, made friends with a couple of kids, one in particular, Brian McDowell. And I was 4'6" when I went into high school. He was 6'4". And it was just a weird combination. And we became best friends in grade 6, though. So I was 10, so was he. And he was still a really tall kid and just a gentle giant. We have stayed friends to this day. We've been very good friends for 57 years. And one of the things he really liked was Yogi Bear, the cartoon. In fact, he carried in his pocket a yellow bar of soap that looked like Yogi Bear's head. I'm not kidding. This was his talisman. So when he'd play football in the schoolyard, he'd make sure he had this Yogi Bear bar of soap in his pocket. And he was so into magical thinking. He believed this was helping him win at football. He said it would bring him good luck. And as we became good friends, even though the soap had taken a bit of a beating, it had been used a few times and it wasn't quite the bear's head anymore. He actually gave me, as his best friend, the Yogi Bear yellow bar of soap. And I had it for years. And it was something so important to him because it brought him luck, as he was convinced. I must talk to him and find out if he remembers it. And I'm sure he does. And I don't remember whatever happened to that bar of soap.
The Yogi Berra bar of soap. Brought
Not
to you.
Yogi Berra. He was
Yogi Berra. I know. I'm still having a hard time talking, Mike. But I was going to make
it's gotta
a
be
hilarious
5G.
line. The Yogi Bear bar of soap. Brought to you by the COVID-19 protection team.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been episode 153 of the Brain Software Podcast. I'm Chris Thompson, and this has been me and the amazing Mike Mandel talking all about easy self-hypnosis. Remember to go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/ESH, which is obviously short for easy self-hypnosis, and get started today. You'll love it.
Excellent, man. Hey, Chris, listen. It's raining.